Okay. All right, let's start by just doing a quick review in case you've forgotten what happened the last few weeks. First of all, I start off by saying that when we talk about a passion-driven life, passion is driven by our nature, in other words, our own personal gifts, natural gift, also by our nurture, all right, how we are brought up, and finally by the new birth. As we are born again, God gave us the Holy Spirit and spiritual gift. And so when all these three coincide together, all right, then you'll find passion, okay, in what we are doing. But if any one of these three things is out of alignment, then of course there will be a little bit of problem in terms of discovering passion for God, okay, in our ministry or in our work even. So when I talk about passion, we don't necessarily just mean church work, all right? For some people, God's call upon their life is not so much in the church, but out in the marketplace. So as long as they can do it with passion, then of course using God's gifts, then you have a passion-driven life, more than just purpose-driven. So the difference is one is duty-driven, and the other is love-driven. Okay, then the second point which you made in the past was that personality come in different shape and types, all right? So, and it's basically describe our natural aptitudes for certain kind of work. So you see even children, when they're young, like my granddaughter, she's very observant, she likes to use her hand. We recognize that she has this inclination towards physical, manipulative kind of gifting, all right? So she likes to do things, make things, all right, rather than interact with people all the time, okay? So all this, when they're young, we can see the difference. Then, of course, we also talk about temperament. Now, the difference between personality type and temperament is more of a certain motivational character. Different people are motivated differently to achieve their own self-image. Everyone wants to have a positive self-image. Nobody can survive with a negative self-image. All right. So what they do is actually to boost their self-image, whether they are conscious or not. That's what they are aiming to do. So, and we mentioned that there are three very important things that contribute to a positive self-image. One is self-esteem, all right? The person must feel worthwhile about himself or herself, all right? Then the second one is self-confidence, all right? Self-confidence. The person must feel that he or she is competent in whatever she's doing, all right? So they will not do things that reveal incompetence because that will destroy their self-image. And the last one is self-respect, okay? So everyone like to be in an environment where they can gain self-respect, all right? Because the opposite of self-respect would be self-hatred, which is very bad for the person. So all this contribute to this positive self-image. So, and God also wants us to have a positive self-image, all right? And so you find that scripture talk about how God wants to transform us into the image of his son. And that's a positive development, not negative, okay? So consciously or unconsciously, different personality have different path to self-esteem. So we may then understand why, some people do certain thing, all right? Because that is their way to build their positive self-image. And to some people, it may be a kind of destructive activity, but nevertheless, to them, it is important. And so today we are going on to the second part of this puzzle. All right, so the first three lessons is about, or rather the second and third lessons is basically about nature. All right, we are born with certain personality types, certain aptitudes, and certain attitudes too, self-image. Okay, not everyone is the same, all right? So we need to recognize that fact. And as parents, sometimes we may confuse our own path to self-esteem or self-image as the path to the self-image of our children. So we impose on them what we think they should be or what they should do to gain a positive self-image. But actually, in the end, it's our own positive self-image that we are trying to build, not the children or the child's self-image. So this is very important. So that is nature. We are born with it. We can't change very much about that part of us. Though nurture, all right, which we're going to talk about today, will help to shape or to enhance or sometimes even distort this natural tendency, all right? So today we are talking about nurture, okay? So essentially there are three questions I would like to ask about anything is what is that? Huh? What do you mean by nurture, okay? So what constitutes nurture? All right, of course, those of us who are educators, teacher, we talk about nature versus nurture, which I talk about later on, but teacher cannot change the nature, but teacher's job is to change, teacher and parent, I would say, their job is to focus on the nurture, okay, which may be comprises family upbringing, education, and even life experiences, which is part of it, though it's not something we choose. Okay, second thing rather that we have to look at is why is this concept of nurture important? Because nurture qualifies us for God's call, all right? All of us may be born with the same kind of gifting, right? But what happened at the end of our adulthood is really dependent on nurture, okay? So God used our family, our environment, and our education to prepare us for our calling. Now, for many of us, our calling will not materialize until we are in our late adulthood. Now, that would be surprising, huh? Because we want to start things early. In Singapore, we think by the age of 30, we want to be millionaire. But I think, God has a longer timeline, okay? Because some of our character take a bit longer to mature. And some of us come to faith in Christ much later. So it can't happen in our 20s or 30s, okay? And then, of course, the third question we want to ask tonight is how then can we equip ourselves, now nurture ourselves? Or I wouldn't say nurture ourselves. How do we use this idea of nurture to prepare us for God's call upon our life? If we are not sure yet what that is, even if we are sure, we still have to work on this nurture. It's a never-ending task, okay? All right. So my point here then is to say we can't change our past, okay? Most of us have gone through a certain family upbringing, a certain education, or even a life experience. We can't change that anymore, but we can change our future. So that's what we're going to work at. Okay, no point regretting our past, but rather here we want to, in Christ, we have a new future. All right, new future. Okay, so let's start with the first part, the what question. What constitutes nurture that qualify us for God's call? All right, so there's this, of course, question of how much is a person's character formed by nature or how much is nurture. All right, we don't have to worry about that, but we know that it takes both. Okay, so when you talk about nature, we are saying that some people are born with certain personality traits, all right, which is very evident even in the mother's womb. All right, for example, I have two daughters. One is very still in the mother's womb. In fact, she was so still that the doctor was a bit worried that she has kind of like gone to sleep for good, and so she had to be induced in the birth. But there was nothing wrong with her. It's just her personality. Okay, turned out that when she grew up, she was quite introverted. Okay, all right. And then of course the younger one is opposite. Okay, extrovert in the womb, kicking around. You can see her leg kicking in the womb. You can feel her, and it's restless. And so we have a different personality right from the womb. So that when they came out, she was extroverted, talkative, and different. So we can't determine that it's God who gave us this personality. Okay, so this is nature, all right? And I don't see, even now that they're in the 30s, there's not much change. Don't nurture help to smoothen out certain things, but still the basic personality traits are still there. Then of course, this nature, all right, can either be enhanced or distorted by our nurture. Okay, so the purpose of nurture, therefore, is to enhance our nature, our natural, what you call abilities or competencies, rather than try to work against it. All right, as I mentioned right from the start, some people are born left-handed, some are born right-handed. So some parent would force the left-handed to use their right hand by using the cane or whatever method they use. But that's not what is recommended, okay? Because that will make the person feel incompetence, all right, or something is wrong with them and so on. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is family upbringing. All right, so you can see there a picture of myself and my wife training our granddaughter who is a bit Amor, half Amor, Polish, how to say Chinese 恭喜发财 and all that. Huh? So she enjoyed this process. So this is nurture, all right? Okay, so it's very important. If they have a very positive experience of nurture, then when they grow up, they'll have a strong, positive self-image, okay? Which is marked by self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-respect. That's very important. So what we are doing now is to input all these positive, what you call qualities in her. All right, but we have to identify what is her gifting, personality gifting. So we work with the gifting, not work against it. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk a bit about what is positive and negative parenting. Now, I know some of you are parents, not all of you are, but some of you already have been parented, okay? Either experience a positive or negative parenting in your childhood. There's nothing you can do about that, okay? But for those who are still parenting children or even young adult or whatever, the same principle will apply. Are we positive? Are we engaging in positive parenting or negative parenting? All right, let me just explain a little bit what I mean by that. Because in Alpha we have this parenting course too, right? So from there we have this chart that I found very helpful to help us understand how we were parented and how we are parenting today. Okay, so there are basically two what you call dimension, there are more dimensions to parenting than this, but basically we can use this as a guide. Okay, either our parenting approach is warm or not warm. Okay, so this is one scale. And then the other scale is whether we are firm or not firm. So when you put these two scales together, you'll get this 4 parenting style. All right. I mean, it's helpful. It doesn't describe all kinds of parents, but it's helpful, a kind of conceptual way to help us know where we are. Okay. So, well, either our parenting style is very warm, and there are some parents who are very warm, huggy, lovey-dovey, all right, and some parents who are not warm, they are more distant, they hardly touch their child or hug their children, and so you have two extremes, okay? All right, so those at the top are warm, those at the bottom are not warm. And then the other horizontal scale is some are very firm, all right? Okay, there are strict rules, they cannot be violated, they don't give way. And some parents are a bit more chin cai, we say, not firm. Okay, anything goes. Okay, so when you combine these two scales together, you get 4 kinds of parenting. Okay, so if you are not warm and not firm, we call that neglectful parenting, or Hokkien we say bo chap. Bo chap. Okay, now the effect, what is the effect on now notice this is under negative parenting, okay? Not firm, not warm, all right? Bo chap parenting. Okay, so essentially the parents are quite indifferent, all right? Now, usually this happens only because for some reason or other, one of the parent is maybe a step parent or whatever, no interest in the child. Okay, so the effect is to produce rebellion in the child, okay? When a child is neglected, all right, they will rebel, okay? So you'll find that as they grow up, they lose self-control. That's why a lot of this youth in the RTC, Reformatory Training Center, which is for youth criminals under 21, they usually have parents who are indifferent to them, okay? Especially father, all right? So they end up rebellious, out of control, okay? All right, then you have another kind of parent who is very warm but not firm. All right, lovey-dovey, never scold the children, never discipline them. And so we call this indulgent parenting. All right, indulgent. Huh? So what is the effect? Well, indulgent parenting, we can see some of this happening sometime, in a shopping center. They dare not scold their children just make all kinds of noise. So what happens is they tend to be overprotective of their child. They don't want to hurt their child, they don't want to damage them emotionally, they're not discipline them. So they produce a child that's self-centered. They think they can get away with whatever they want just by throwing their tantrum, and so they become irresponsible. So these are also problematic children when they grow up in school. They are totally, a bit out of control because their parents always give in to them. So they expect the school teachers to give in to them too. And then, of course, the third kind of parenting is you're very firm, but not warm, okay? All right, so we call this authoritarian parenting. So what is the effect of authoritarian parenting? Well, the parenting attitude is very controlling. You don't do that, stop it, That's all the child hear. All right, so end up very fearful child. Dare not do anything or venture out of the rules. So end up the child has no initiative, okay? Dare not try anything new because the child is afraid of being scolded or caned or whatever. But there's no demonstration of warmth. No hugging from the parent. I think as parents, some of us who are young children, or maybe it's already past, if you're past that stage, then I suppose you still can do something. They still, children still need a hug from father and mother, right? Especially father. Even my own daughters, now they're in the 30s, whenever they come and visit, my elder one will always expect me to give her a hug. So if I forget, she'll say, no hug today, that kind of thing. So whatever their age is, they still need their warmth, okay? Of course, we don't have to be firm with them now because most of them already past the age. If you have not been firm, earlier, it's too late already. But thankfully, we were able to be firm, but also we try to be warm. We hug them after we cane them, okay? But because ideal situation is where you're firm and warm at the same time. So that is called positive parenting, all right? So this is not different from authoritarian. This is authoritative parenting. Okay, so you're warm, but you're also firm, all right? So that's clear-cut rules. Okay, like for example, in our household, disrespect is not tolerated, okay? All right, they can do anything, they can make mistake, but they cannot be disrespectful. All right, so that's when I get angry and I will insist that, there's a price to pay. All right, so basically we also teach them we respect their choices, but at the same time, we don't allow them to be suka, okay? There's no such thing, all right? So we respect them as individuals. They can make choices, but they cannot make wrong choices. All right, there's consequences for wrong choices. So the effect is to create responsible child. That means once the child begins to learn that certain things are right, certain things are wrong, and you can't blame other people. All right, and so we call this authoritative parent. Okay, and that's the best case scenario, right? Some people personality find it difficult to be let me just go back. So I say some people, their personality, they find hard to be firm, okay, because of their personality, especially those who are NF, they're more soft. And then, of course, some are too rigid, all right, especially those SJ type, okay, too rigid, all right. Some like the NT, too bochap, that's also the danger, all right. Okay, so just be aware, all right. So in a sense that our aim, all right, idea is to impart positive parenting to our children, all right. The whole idea is to maximize and enhance their opportunity, their nature, enhance their nature. through our nurture, all right, working with their nature, okay? So different child require different kind of nurture, okay? There's no one, what you call, one method or, one method for all, okay? So you have to discern what kind of children you have, and you give them the right kind of stimulation, all right? Encouragement. Some need more encouragement than others, all right? So if they're NF or NT, they may need more opportunity to develop their cognitive skill. They are more cognitive, intellectual stimulation, all right? For example, my both children are in this category, so they like to read and so on. But if you have a child who is more the SJ or SP, they're more hands-on, then in that case you must give them toys that allow them to build something, building kits and so on. Then they can develop their vocational and technical skills, so they're more skill oriented. Now, this is such general observation, but of course each child is different. So the important thing is to recognize their natural gift, and then as parents we try to encourage it and also create opportunity for them to develop themselves. We don't impose on them what we think is best for them. When we do that, then we are going to have a lot of heartaches, and disappointment too. All right, because they don't meet up to our expectation. Okay, and I will say that in the matter of education, from my observation, and also being a school teacher for 10 years, more than 10 years, I would say that I've seen that the school system reward certain personality type, all right, more than the other type. So those who are not does not fit into the school system, they tend to so-called do badly, but that doesn't mean they are bad, but because they keep getting low grades, all right, so their self-esteem, all right, and their self-respect and self-confidence is demolished or even distorted, okay? So they became rebellious in school and so on. Because the government is trying to do something about this, they have this special school just for normal tech students. Everyone there is the same, so which is good. Okay, so what about us? Well, maybe we have grown up with different parenting styles. Some are positive, some are negative. So we can't do anything about it. We cannot go back to it. There's nothing we can do. So that is part of our nature. So if we have what I call neglectful parent, we may end up with a need for inner healing, okay? We feel rejected, we feel unwanted, and so on. So if you are in that state, before you can discover God's purpose for your life, you have to make sure that you are personally, what I call, healed of this sense of neglect. Let me tell you something. When I became parents, I realized that I'm very, I don't know how to express emotion, and I remember that when my first daughter was born, I can't even say I love you. This word. I don't know why I say it to my wife, maybe during courtship, but I couldn't say it to my daughters. I had to force myself to say. That's very strange. It's like emotionally, I was a bit crippled. Okay, so how did it happen? I don't know, but maybe because of neglect. Because my family have a lot of siblings. I have 7 brothers and 1 sisters, all brothers, fighting each other all the time. We do our own thing. So that could have been a result of neglect by default, because there are so many children. All right, so if you grow up with indulgent parents, then you may become very self-centered, and you need to let the Holy Spirit and the Word of God develop some discipline, self-control. All right, because indulgent parents may end up with children who are a bit out of control, okay? Or if you had authoritarian parents who constantly, scold you, and you are the type who need, to be creative, and the parent was ruled by law, then you may grow up becoming very unable to express love and grace. So you need to experience grace, God's love and grace. You know, when I first became a Christian, I was more comfortable with law than with grace, you know. Now, it's not a theological problem, okay? It's not theology, all right? It's just that I feel more comfortable if the Christianities have laws, okay? Tell me what I can and cannot do. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a result of my upbringing, but when I talk about love and grace, I feel like Christianity become very lovey-dovey, and I'm not comfortable with that. All right. It took me a long time to really appreciate God as Father. I'm okay with God as King, God as Lord, you know, but and even Master, but not Father. Okay. And some of this song about God, you know, as Father and Daddy, I find I cannot take it. Okay. All right. So it took me a while to find out why. Well, okay, it's probably some consequence of parenting, but I'm not sure exactly what. But I thank God that I managed to get over it. But that also may account for the fact that I cannot express the same kind of love and to my children when they were young. But of course, God gave me all girls and 3 girls in my house, including my wife. Okay, so I can how to show love. All right, but it was a long process. All right, so okay, so it depends on, but if you have authoritative parent, I mean the ideal positive parent, that's great. If you have a parent like that, thank God for that. All right, Moses has it, Paul also has it, Jesus also had positive parents, authoritative parents. All right, and they grew up to be, positive personality that bless the whole world, so to speak. But if we have been experiencing negative parenting, then let's make sure it stops in our generation and not pass it on. Okay. All right. So that kind of covered this idea of nurture, that we may be product of a positive parenting or negative parenting. But whatever it is, there's nothing we can do about it except to ask God to bring healing if it had been negative, just like for me. It took quite a while for me to recognize that I need healing in that area. Okay, so that is part of the conversion nurture, that God himself nurtures us. Okay, then the other area is life experience. All right, life experiences can be positive or negative too. All right, so you all go through different stages in life. Some of us have positive experience when we're young. You get to travel, you get access to learning opportunities. But if you're from a poor family, you may not, ever travel. I never traveled outside of Singapore until I was 12 years old. All right. Never traveled in a train. Okay. And so on. Partly because we were stateless, so we couldn't travel. But also we were poor. All right. So we didn't have learning opportunities, which could have stimulated. So I had to create my own toys, play myself, and so on. Okay. So there was no learning resources. We were on a survival mode all the time. All right. So how do we build up self-image in that situation? Well, but nowadays, of course, most of us are better off, so we can give our children all that positive, development opportunities. Most of our children go for piano class, dance class, whatever class. Okay, endless. But we have to choose the right one, okay? All right, and not just do it because everybody else is doing it. So the more positive as life experience we have, the better. All right, then of course that's childhood. Then after that we grow up, become teenager, all right, adults, and so on. So we also go through different lives experiences. Some are positive, some are negative, all right, and so. Like, for example, some people along the way experience death, okay, or loved ones, parents, all right, either death or old age or sudden death, like recently, the 5 young men, died in a car crash. So this can be quite traumatic for those survivors. And so this is part of the life experience. Or divorces, some people are divorced, all right, or their parent divorced or whatever, okay? So all these have an impact on our nurture, or even this, or should not be disaster, sorry. I think it's the third D's with diseases, sicknesses, all right? So each of us may have a different experience of disease. Some are minor, some are major, all right, like COVID now and other major diseases that could have put us through some difficult experiences. Or it may not be us, maybe someone we loved and so on. All right. And of course, some of us may have no opportunity, no learning opportunity because of poverty, family crisis, etc. So all these negative experiences can lead to poor self-image, okay? Lack of confidence, poor self-esteem, and no self-respect. And that was my situation before I became a Christian. When I went to university, I basically had very low self-esteem, even though I can study, but I was very insecure until I come to Christ. So that is the good news, all right? God changed us. But I entered in the university with a very poor self-image. So in terms, as parents now, of course, or even as teachers, some of us are teachers, we must learn to identify a child's gift and then, of course, affirm it, okay? Provide opportunity for them to develop it, okay? The gifting. Okay, let me just change the angle. All right, so that I'm looking at you, okay? I'm changing the camera. All right, so that is life experience. And in a sense, whether it's positive or negative, it is also part of God's nurture, all right? So I won't say that God's nurture is always positive. So sometimes, for example, I may have some negative experiences, okay? Maybe in pastoral ministry, but I feel that those things actually help me to help other pastors, okay? All right. And so not all negative experiences are bad. The Bible tells us that Jesus learned obedience through the thing he suffered. All right. So not all the time, positive, happy. Even Moses, even though he had good family background, upbringing, but he also went through very tough times, and so did Paul. Okay, so negative life experiences are not bad in a sense in God's economy. All right, God worked all things for good. Because the third area of nurture is education. All right. So that's where most of us go through primary school. Some of us have the privilege of going through kindergarten. All right. For many of us, we don't have this privilege. You just go to primary school, secondary school, and then pre-university, and then university. All right. And so, and all we learn is through the schools. Okay. Most of it, all right, is by the school system. All right, so whether it's languages, English, Chinese, maths, all right, sciences, we all learned it in the schools. Because in the secondary school, it become a bit more technical, all right, science, and then, but all this shape our worldviews, for better or for worse, okay, we are influenced by our schools, the curriculum, and the teachers particularly, okay? So thankfully, I think in Singapore, the school system basically still conservative. We don't have funny things happening, but occasionally, all right, we hear of some strange things happening in the schools in terms of curriculum, of course. And all the thing, I feel quite sad about what is happening in the education system. I don't know whether it's true or it's just my own experience. I remember when I first started teaching in a school, 60 or more percentage in government school, okay, I'm talking about government school, 60 or more percentage are Christian, okay? Most of the teachers are Christian, okay? So we could have Christian fellowship and all that in school. But in recent years, when I went back to do some relief, just to get some income. I was surprised that there are so few Christian teachers. So my point, the question that I'm asking is, what happened to the Christian? Why are they not going into education, which is so important to shape the thinking and the mindset of our young people? Is that the reason why there are so few, the number of young people coming to faith, non-Christian family, is so low this time? Could it be because there are not enough Christian teachers to influence them? You see, most of us became Christian because we're influenced by Christian teachers. All right, and now there are so few. Okay, and even those who are Christian are a bit more quiet about their faith, and sadly, it's dominated by the other religion I will mention for this. It's dominated by the other religion now in the education service. It seems that they know that this is the place to influence the next generation. So we are losing our young people. Okay, I'm going off the subject, but the point I'm saying is that we are influenced by our education we all go through. So sometimes education may strengthen our faith if we come across a good teacher, Christian teacher, or our faith may be shaken by a skeptical teacher, all right, or a non-Christian. Okay, whether it's in secondary school or tertiary education, the same thing can happen. Okay, all right, but most education is to equip us to fit into the economy. Okay, all right, it's to get us to work, essentially, not so much to develop us. All right, it's to make us get a job. All right, whatever subject we take. So if you are called to ministry, then we have to take up, go to seminary or Bible school to take up divinity as a subject. If not, the other university is basically to equip us to be workers in the economy. But of course, through education, our worldview is enlarged. Enlarged, maybe for good or not good, we don't know. All right. So as someone said, if we become more open-minded, and in some cases we don't know how to close it back. Okay, and so open until we lose our faith. Anyway, most education institution, either in Singapore or many places, are secular. Okay, in a sense that they don't teach you anything about the faith. Okay, in Singapore, it's essentially they try once and then they phase it out. So there's no religious education in the government schools. So whatever is taught there, it is secular. And of course, we parents, especially even Christian parents, we may be very much influenced by this educational system's economic objective, and all we want is for our children to succeed, so-called, in life. Okay, to earn more money, to get a good job, and so on. And that can put a lot of pressure on our children. I don't know where you heard this tragic story about a Christian parent, a mother. I think it happened 2 years ago, maybe a bit longer, but it was in the news. All right. This family, basically Christian, okay? It said that it happened in a Christian home, but it was not mentioned in the papers, but they are Christian, we know. So the mother is really striving to achieve success through her daughter, okay? So it's her own self-image that is at stake rather than the daughter's self-image. So force her to study, pressure to, it's like B is not good, only A. And so, of course, apparently she expects her daughter to come up with all 7 or 8 distinction A for her O level. And unfortunately, for this daughter, she got all A except one subject. I can't remember which one, which was a B. And because of that, she felt she had failed her mother. All right. And then she committed suicide. Okay. In the suicide note, basically saying she had failed her mother. And of course, her mother, became very traumatized by that. I think a few months later, she also committed suicide. and of course left the father who basically lost his sanity. Okay, so I think that is very tragic when we are all driven by the school system. So we got to be very careful. Okay, even though our children go through the school system, we must, as Christian parents, impart Christian values. Why do we put our children through the school system? Is it just to produce workers, to run the economy, or to produce godly and moral citizens? So the idea of education, secular education, has changed. Okay, so we may also be product of this system. Okay, so we may have gone through this, and all we want is just to earn a living. But having said that, God is sovereign. All right, He can use what we've gone through, even for wrong reasons, to achieve His purpose. Okay, because ideally, that all parents are Christian, they know how to guide their children through the proper education and so on. But the reality is we are governed by societal values. And of course, the worst thing is Christian parents do not impose Christian values. All right, to not use Christian value to parent their children. They in fact follow the value system of the world. Okay, so we all go through the same process. Okay, so these are some of our nurture that we've gone through. For better or for worse, we all gone through the system, right? Okay, so the question is, where does God fit in, especially if we were not Christian during the whole process? And for me, yeah, mine was only after I entered in university, then I became a Christian. By then it's too late to change whatever direction. You just have to complete the system, so to speak. So the second part of it then is, why is this important? Nurture. Okay, I'm going to just look through a few characters in the Bible, and you see how their future ministry was determined by their upbringing. All right. Okay, let's look at the most famous one. I mean, there are a few very famous. I think we only need to mention three. All right. First one is Moses. Okay, in Old Testament, everything hinges on Moses. So what about Moses? Is he just another guy who happened to be picked up by God? It's not. Okay, if you read Acts chapter 7, Stephen said that at this time, Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight, and he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. Okay, so he was nurtured by the parents for 3 months. Then they're afraid of the Egyptian. They were trying to kill all the male child in Egypt. All right, Hebrew child, I mean. And so they quickly push him out, into the river. And then, of course, he ended up being adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, so Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And Moses, now read this part, okay? Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of Egyptians, and he was mighty in his words and deeds. So he's not just an ordinary guy. He was trained in the wisdom of Egypt. All right, the education that he got the best education. He's good in his words. All right, and even deeds. Okay, according to Hebrew tradition, he was actually a commander in the Egyptian army. All right, okay, being a Pharaoh daughter, so they have status. So he was a man who was what you call mighty. Okay, so it's not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry. So his upbringing provide him with the kind of learning that was necessary because he's going to be the lawgiver. Now, can you imagine if he's not educated? Okay, all right, don't have the kind of statures, don't have the kind of leadership. How is going to lead 2 million people or maybe 3 million people? Okay, and so we're going to see that actually God has already prepared him for the role. All right, by putting him under Pharaoh in Pharaoh's household. If he just raised up in a Hebrew, okay, if he just raised up in a Hebrew family, probably he'll never had that opportunity. All right. So let me just mute this. Okay. All right. A second. Help me to mute.
Am I the host?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I forgot to make you co-host. Never mind. Okay. Let's continue. So let's look at Moses. All right. So for the first 40 years, he was raised in an Egyptian court. He was educated in the best of Egyptian knowledge or education, whatever they have. Egypt is also a place where there are a lot of study going on. You know, a lot of like for example, you look at the pyramids, how they built the Egyptian pyramids, right? That means there is a lot of engineering knowledge and so on that is going on in Egypt. Of course, he was, according to tradition, he was a commander in the Egyptian army. So he know how to command people, he know how to organize and so on. But of course, at the age of 40, he thought he was ready to be the deliverer for his people. He knew by then that he was not an Egyptian, all right, that he's actually a Hebrew. So he tried to be the champion for the Hebrew, but in the end, he killed an Egyptian. And he was found out, he fled from Egypt, okay, because the Pharaoh it's a different Pharaoh, was trying to kill him, okay. So he fled to Midian, where he met the wife and so on. And then between the age of 40, okay, my point there is that, you know, when God wants to do something in our lives, sometimes he allows failure, okay, and then because our time is not yet. So sometimes we experience failure in our life and we think, oh, where is God, you know? Why does it allow me to fail? Okay, so failure is not a bad thing, okay? Failure just revealed to us that our time is not yet. All right, so God determines when we are ready, not us, okay? And of course, he spent the next 40 years in the Sinai wilderness because Midian is just across the Sinai desert. Now, we may be thinking, wow, what has he been doing for 40 years, you know? Of course, he was a shepherd. He looked after the father-in-law's sheep and so on. But in 40 years, he get to know the terrains of Sinai. You know, you got to move the sheep from one place to another place. I'm sure he had passed by Mount Sinai many times, you know. And I believe that those 40 years are not wasted years. Of course, he also had a lot of time to be alone with God, a lot of me time. Okay, 40 years of me time when he's with the sheep. But those years were actually for, I believe, now though it's not stated very clearly in the Bible, those were the years where he became so familiar with the Sinai area that when he brought the people of Egypt out, he was not walking blind, you know. He already knew the terrain. So God has prepared him to lead the nation, all right, by letting him spend 40 years wandering around in the wilderness. Of course, at the age of 80, he thought that he was ready to retire. Okay, so that's when he felt his prime, his days are over. He didn't feel he was ready for anything. He just wanted to disappear into the background, and then God called him. So our readiness is not dependent on how we view ourselves, but how God views us. We may think we are too old, but if you have not reached 80, I think you're okay, you know. All right. Sometimes I see in churches, some church leaders, they talk about retirement and letting the younger generation take over. I'm not saying we should not let the younger generation rise up, but the idea of retirement is not in the Bible. So what do? These people, they once upon a time ruled the church in church councils. And then when they reach about 50 or 60, they say, oh, it's time for us to retire. Now they're supposed to be at their prime. They're supposed to be the elders of the church, but they retire. And what do they do at that time? They go for a tour, eat durian, all right, spend their time doing meaningless things. They should have been mentors for the next generation, not retire. There's no retirement. Okay, so you had this generation of leaders who feel that they are not needed anymore, and so they spend their time going ballroom dancing and all that kind of jazz. All right. So, but anyway, if you're not reached 80, don't talk about retirement. Okay, there's no retirement. We can be mentors. All right, and I think that's the role that we should play, whatever our age. Okay, so you have Moses. He started out at 40, he thought he was somebody, discovered he was nobody. This is not from me, this is taken from some book I read. Huh? At 80, he thought he was nobody, but discovered that a nobody plus God is somebody. Okay. All right, so you're never too old. Okay. All right. I don't think there's anyone here is above 80, right? Am I? Okay. So we are still young by God's standard. So don't say that you're retired. There's no retirement. Huh? So there's still a future for us. Okay, the next person I'm going to look at is Paul. Again, I did mention a little bit about him the last time, that he is no ordinary Tom, Dick, and Harry, okay? Now, if you look at his background, again, the reason why, okay, so first of all, the reason why Moses was chosen is because of his education. That he's a man of learning. He really, the best qualified. He has a qualification, all right? Even though he did not acknowledge it, he was highly qualified for the task. And he may not have realized it. All the years spent in Egypt, in the desert, is to prepare him for that day when he was called Egypt out of Israel out of Egypt. And he need to be that kind of character, okay, in order to do that. Now, and of course, we know that the Old Testament is basically the law of Moses. Huh? It's all about Moses. All the prophets go back to Moses and so on. So he's really the founder of the religion of the Israelites, or we call it Judaism. So when it comes to the New Testament, we have another character that dominated the New Testament, okay, and that is Paul. Again, Paul is no ordinary Jew, all right? Okay, first of all, he was a son of a Pharisee, which means that from young he has been brought up in this strict sect of the Pharisee. Okay, so, and his father is a very strict Pharisee from a pure tribe, the tribe of Benjamin. And his father put him under the best lawyer in Israel in those times called Gamaliel. Huh? Okay, his name was mentioned in the book of Acts too. Gamaliel was a well-known lawyer. So Paul sat under Gamaliel's feet. All right, so he has the best educator or education. And not only that, he was a member of, he was a Roman citizen, all right, because he was born in Tarsus, a Roman city. And so he acquired Roman citizenship by birth, which is something that people had to pay money for. Huh? So he was a man of status. Huh? If you are a Roman citizen, you're protected. Okay, you're protected against many things. And of course, he was also a member of the Sanhedrin, all right, a rising star, as you were. Huh? The Sanhedrin is a Jewish council of Jewish parliament of sort. Huh? Okay, the highest level of government in Israel in those days. So he was a young man, he was a member. All right, that was before he came to Christ. Essentially, he's so well educated, he basically know the Old Testament by heart. He know Hebrew, he know Greek, he's writing in Greek. He wrote all the New Testament in Greek. His writing is very compressed, okay? Unlike other writers, okay? He's very compressed and very concise in his writing. So, and in fact, he himself admitted in Galatians 1:14, he said, I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people. So you see, he's like a high flyer, like nowadays, we have all these high flyer scholars, all right? And so he was right at the top, okay, among the Jewish people, all right, excelling among all the people of his age. He himself admitted that. So he's not ordinary guy, you know nothing and so on. In fact, one of the governor, Festus, when Paul was trying to defend himself, he shouted at Paul. He said, "Paul, you are beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad." All right. So the people recognize that Paul is a man of learning. Maybe we may call it today doctorates or something. Okay. All right. And said, and people know it that he is a man of learning, and then they're thinking that Paul had gone mad. All right, because of too much learning. Okay, because you start talking about resurrection of the dead of Christ and so on. And of course, we know also that he's very familiar with Greek learning and culture and philosopher, even the poets. He knows all the Greek poets. In Acts chapter 17, verse 27, 28, he was actually able to quote the Greek philosophers and the poet. Now, most are not aware that when he said, "In him we live and move and have our being," he's not quoting the Bible. Okay, some people thought this is from the Bible. He's actually quoting the Greek philosopher and then and the poets. Okay, for he said, "For we are indeed his offspring." This is not the words from the Bible. This is actually words from the Greek philosophers. So Paul knows philosophy, all right? He studied them too. So essentially what we are saying is that here is a man who from young had been brought up, with a mind, in the intellect, there's, bursting, as it were, with knowledge and learning. And if God wanted to use someone to write his revelation, he had to choose someone like that. He cannot choose a fisherman, Peter is a fisherman, all right? He didn't write very much, okay? He wrote 2 letters in the New Testament, but they are not cheap one, okay? But who wrote Romans? Who wrote Galatians and all this heavy-duty book? Well, it's Paul, because he has the training and the capacity, all right? Because of his upbringing, his education, and so on. So he said this, he said of himself in Philippians chapter 3, "If anyone thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more." And I said, if I want to boast, want to compare with me, I have more reason to boast in the flesh, means in the natural, okay? I was circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. Now, how many of us dare to say that? That we really kept the law, okay? So here is Paul, okay? He made no apology that he excelled, all right, in every area, okay? And I believe that it's no coincidence God chose him, not because he's religious, but because of his upbringing, God can use him to bring forth the revelation. You see, the revelation of God sometimes can be quite complex. It takes a good mind to be able to put it in words. All right. So to explain things. And Paul is that person. Okay. I don't think if it passed to Peter, Peter could explain. In fact, Peter himself was quite blurred himself. He even wrote some of Paul's writing is so difficult, I also get lost. I don't, So Peter also cannot follow Paul, all right, writing. So he just want people, don't distort it, okay? And of course, so you find that, Peter probably won't be the right person to write the book of Romans. But Paul, yes, he has the capacity. So where does he get all this? His upbringing, all right? Nurture, okay, nurture. So we cannot dismiss our nurture, even though for many of us, like Paul, also he was not educated as in the sense of to accept Christ as the Messiah, Jesus as the Messiah. But his training allowed him to understand, able to grasp when he finally confessed faith. Remember, not in this class, in the other class, we talk about theology as faith seeking understanding. Well, it's easy to believe, but it's quite another thing to be able to explain. And Paul is the person who can do it. All right, having known all kinds of learning, he knows the Old Testament Hebrew, he knows Greek, he knows the philosophers, he knows Judaistic law, and so on and so forth. So he said that when he who has set me, in Galatians, he says, when he who has set me apart before I was born. Okay, so Paul didn't say I became a Christian at the road to Damascus. No, he said I was called long before that. God had already prepared me before I was born. And now make sure that you get the right parents, right kind of background, and so on. And who called me by his grace was pleased to reveal his son to me in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles. All right. In other words, only he could do it because of his background. Okay. He understands the Gentile mind. He understands the Greek philosophers and so on. So God set Paul apart from birth. Everything Paul experienced from the day he was born until he was an adult persecuting the church was to prepare him to preach the gospel, all right, and to write 1/3 of the New Testament. Okay, of course, the final character is Jesus himself. Most of us probably just skipped his early childhood, but actually all these are formative years. Now, when Jesus came as a human, he has to go through the same process as all of us, okay? So God has to ensure that he has the right parents, right kind of education, right kind of nurture. So even though the Bible never say very much, but we can read in Luke chapter 2, 29 to 40. It says that when they had performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew, all right, and became strong and filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. Now the question is, how did he learn? Well, in a typical Jewish family, okay, the parent would educate them, all right. Of course, they would learn a trade. Okay, he'll follow the father's trade. So he was trained to be a carpenter, and then they will go through all the learning, maybe in the synagogue and so on. So they'll learn the Torah, and by age 12, they'll be confirmed. All right, they have this kind of like bar mitzvah, they call it, where they are accepted as part of the Israelite community there to show that they have learned the law, they have memorized everything, and so on. So in a sense, we say he was kind of like homeschooled. He didn't attend formal schooling, okay? All right. But he was homeschooled by Joseph and Mary, and every year they will bring him to Jerusalem, all right, to celebrate the Passover. And so he's very familiar with the Jewish custom, laws and custom. In fact, he was so well educated that when he was 12 years old, all right, and he met some of the elders, the parent kind of lost him in a crowd and found him sitting among the elders in the temple and arguing with them theology, all right? So by the age of 12, Jesus was already, well educated in the Torah enough to argue, or I won't say argue, discuss, okay, theology with the elderly people, and they were quite impressed by his knowledge. Okay, so here again, Jesus was brought up in a proper way, godly way. They had godly parents, he has godly education. And so, in fact, in John chapter 7, verse 15, the Jews were surprised because they came from a small town. Jesus' parents came from a small town, Nazareth. And the Jews therefore marveled by what Jesus taught. How, I say in John 7:15 said, how is it that this man had learning when he had never studied? What they mean by never studied? They mean he never attended formal education, all right? But he was more or less homeschooled. Okay, I don't know. I think homeschooling is good nowadays, all right? Many people who study in the school system learn a lot of things they should not learn, okay? But there's a movement among Christian parents to homeschool their own children. Okay, so anyway, he was homeschooled and he came out very well, all right? And so, of course, from 12 years old to 30, we don't know what happened, but probably he just grew up as any other young adult, all right, learning the trade, following the father as carpenter. By the time he reached 30, the father probably passed away already, huh? Because there's no mention of Joseph when Jesus started the ministry. And of course, he probably learned about his ministry, how he was born through Mary, okay? Now, remember, Jesus, when he was on earth in the day of his flesh, he's just like any other human. Even though he had the identity of God, he's not a Superman, okay? He's just human, all right? All right, so having seen the importance of nurture in these three characters, all right, so we know that in some way God also prepared us. See, in the case of Paul, long before he became a Christian, so to speak, he was already being prepared. So the same with all of us, okay? We look back, if you look back and you look at the education you get and the kind of parents you have, the language you learn and so on, you have to believe that God already has chosen you, all right, already preparing you long before you know him. So the question now is, what do you do with all these things? Do you use all these nurture or developmental gifts, all the qualification just for yourself? Especially now that we know Christ, just like Paul, before he knew Christ, all right, he used all these talents, all this gifting to promote himself, okay? And he was, as it were, at the top of his society, the social ladder. But when he came to Christ, he totally gave up all those things. All right. So in the same way, many of us have been equipped, okay, and they've been trained, have been educated. It's not for our sake, It's not just to get a job in a marketplace. Especially now that we are Christian and we look back, we should be asking, why did God put me through all those things? For better or for worse, what is he trying to do with my life? Because, okay, so now we come to the last part. All right, and before we do that, shall we take a 5-minute break? All right, okay, 5-minute break, rest your mind, and then we'll come back in a 5 or 10 minutes. 5 minutes, I'll do it, but I need to set the clock going. Okay, I put as 10 minutes, but we'll come back in 5 minutes, all right?
You want to read me the cohort post?
Oh,
So I can.
okay. Welcome back if you are there. All right, welcome back from your break. Let me share the. Okay, that's. I'll stop this first. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let me restart the PowerPoint slide. Okay, so, all right, I'm going to just round up by talking about, so what do we do with our nature? Okay, now that we are Christian, all right, I assume all of us have come to faith in Christ, okay? So we can look at our nature differently, all right, just like Paul, okay? All right. Even though he don't regard what he have acquired in his past as anything, but nevertheless, those things that he went through shape him for the future. Okay, so now that all of us are born again, the Bible says, all right, we are new creation, all right, in Christ. The old has passed away, behold, the new has come. So, but the character, the attribute that we have acquired in the past and the knowledge remain with us. Okay, we cannot throw that away. All right, just that now we have a new attitude, new purpose for using those knowledge. Okay, for example, even Paul, even though he knows philosophy, he never used that in his preaching. All right, he just know that those things can be used, but also can be abused. Okay, so let's come back to this important verse, all right? Because from next week onward, we are going to look at more of the spiritual gifts, all right? So far, we've been talking about natural gift and nature and nurture. So before we jump to the next stage, we have to recognize, first of all, what the Bible says about why we are saved. Okay, so in Ephesians chapter 8, verse 8, we are familiar with these two verses, 8 to 9. For by grace you have been saved through faith. All right. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his work. Okay, so most of us stop here, all right? So we say, yeah, we are saved by grace, not by works. Most of us stop at verse 9. But actually, you should read on to verse 10, where Paul says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So God had already prepared for every one of us a specific role in his kingdom long before we know him, all right? Beforehand, like Paul said, from the day he was born. So we cannot just forget about our past. We cannot. All right. The past make us who we are today, for better or for worse. Okay. All right. So therefore God used that, and so that we can fulfill the purpose as his kingdom person. Okay, so there are a few areas which I want to touch on, which in a sense about nurture, but now we are talking about Christian nurture. Christian nurture. Okay, just like Paul, when he was started off as a Christian, okay, who was his mentor? Well, his first mentor was Barnabas. Okay, remember? All right, when he first came to faith, he wanted to go and preach the gospel, and then in the end he was rejected. Then what happened? He went back to his hometown, Tarsus, and he was almost forgotten. All right, so he spent the next 10 or 11 years in Tarsus. Okay, totally unknown until Barnabas decided to call him. And so Barnabas brought him back into Antioch, and from there used his talent, his gifting. And Paul started as a what? Teacher. Okay, he didn't start as an apostle. When he went to Antioch, his task was to help teach because of his knowledge, okay, of the Bible, the Old Testament, his understanding of Revelation. In fact, he received revelation when he was back home. All right. This was mentioned in Galatians. He didn't go back to Jerusalem to find out about Christ through the apostle. He went to the desert and God revealed to him everything. Okay. But despite all his knowledge, he needed a human mentor to bring him back to Antioch. So Barnabas was his mentor. So here we have a different kind of parenting. Okay, maybe some of us don't have good parents, a positive or negative parenting, whatever it is. That phase is over. But now we need to find new parents. Okay, so we call this mentoring. All right. Not tormentoring, not torment. Okay, don't go around tormenting people. Okay, we need to mentor, not tormentor. Okay, so, and this also follows Jesus' mentoring model. Okay, when Jesus wanted to call the 12, this is what he did. In Mark chapter 3, verse 13 and 15, he went up on the mountain and called to them those whom he desired, and they came to him. And he appointed 12 whom he also named apostles, what? So that they might be with him, and he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. So this mentoring process involves certain stages. You bring the person to you, spend time building the relationship, but with the objective that you can send them out again to do what they are supposed to be doing, casting out demons and preaching the gospel. So I think the first thing you have to consider in this mentoring process is to look for someone to be your mentor. All right. Maybe it could also be that a mentor look for you. Okay, it doesn't matter. Like in the case of Paul, he didn't look for a mentor, but the mentor Barnabas came looking for him because he saw in him the potential. All right. And so sometimes this relationship is two-way. The mentor look at you and you also look for your mentor. So Paul, for example, he said later on in his life in 1 Corinthians, he said, be imitator of me as I am of Christ. So if you find someone who seriously try to imitate Christ in all his life, then you can approach that person to be your mentor. Okay, don't choose the wrong mentor, all right? Otherwise you'll be tormented. Okay. So Jesus' mentoring strategy has 4 parts. Now, of course, the words that I use here is not in the Bible, but it's used in some management training. But I think it follows exactly what Jesus is doing. So the first one is what we call I do, you watch phase. We call that modeling. Okay. You notice that if you read the gospel at the beginning, Jesus did most of the ministry himself, and the disciples simply follow him around, Maybe Calvin carried the handbag, sorry, not handbag, carry the luggage, yeah. And they do this kind of mechanical stuff, but they spend their time just watching. Okay, so there's this first phase of the training where the disciple just follow around and watch what he's doing. All right, so that is very important. Your mentor must be your model. So the mentor do and you watch. That's the first stage. Then if he's a good mentor, he will go on to the next stage. He will begin to partner with you. All right. So for example, after some time, Jesus began to partner with the disciples. You notice that slowly he began to get involved in his ministry, like the feeding of 5,000. He asked them for solution. And when they didn't get a right solution, he asked them to help out in distribution of the food, the 2 fish and 5 loaves. All right, so you slowly engage them. Okay, so this is called partnering. So if you're a good mentor, they don't just show you all his kung fu, but they also slowly tell you how to do it. Okay, all right, how to do it, and you work together with you, but it won't suddenly dump on you. All right, and it will have to be stages. So you let you do a little bit and then see how you progress. I remember once when we were doing this EE training. Any of you heard of EE? Evangelism Explosion. Well, they also have this. Anyone have heard of EE? Evangelism Explosion? Show your hand. No hand.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, some of you have. Okay. One. Uh, Let me just you know how to indicate your hand. How many hand? Huh? Only Sheena, no. The rest never heard of EE.
Yes.
Okay, evangelism explosion is a evangelism method. Basically, it's like that. The pastor will bring you along to do visitation. Okay, and the first few visits, he will do all the work from the starting, presentation, and then sharing the gospel, and then leading a person to Christ. The first stage is he'll do everything, and the one who follow him, all right, will just watch. Then, as he learn the method, all right, then he will, at the next visit or so, he will ask him to maybe do the introduction, all right, or give a testimony. But the mentor, the pastor, will continue to do the main part. And bit by bit, they hand over the whole process to the assistant, the mentee, until the stage come where he can do the whole work from beginning to the end. But all this time, the mentor will be with him, okay? But he slowly hand over more and more of the presentation, okay, during the visitation to this mentee. So that is called partnering, okay? So this is part of the strategy of evangelism explosion. So that way they multiply workers. Okay, third stage is coaching, all right? So the partnering is I do, you do, all right? Now coaching means now you do, I watch, okay? So that's also incorporated in evangelism explosion. The final stage is the mentee will do the whole work from beginning to the end while the pastor will just watch and then after debrief him, all right, how he did. So the same thing Jesus sent the 12 disciples. Okay, after he coached them, right, he gave them a brief debriefing about what to do. He sent them off, okay, 2 by 2. And then they came back reporting back to him what happened. Okay, so there is this debriefing, report back and debrief. All right, and then Jesus gave them some advice. When they were so excited, they say even demons were subject to your name. They're so excited they can cast out demons. And Jesus says, I saw Satan fell. And then he said, but don't rejoice because of the demons can be cast out, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. So he kind of like corrected them. So this is called coaching. And finally, when they are ready, Jesus gave them the Great Commission. All right, now you do without the master around. Go make disciples of all the nations. Now Jesus won't be there to coach them. They have learned enough. They can do it on their own. So same thing with evangelism explosion. After they learn the whole process and the pastor think that they're okay, the next time visitation, the pastor won't go with them. They go with another person and they repeat the same process. So this is called empowering. All right, so I think if you want to select a mentor, make sure the mentor understand how to coach you. And of course, you must have a specific area you want to be coached. Not say, oh, I just want to be a good Christian. That is not not the purpose of mentoring. Mentoring is for ministry. Like for example, maybe you say, I want to learn how to preach. Okay, can you mentor me in preaching? Okay, and then okay, the pastor or whoever your mentor will preach in front of you, and then you watch. Then the next round, he will get you involved in some part of the preaching. You know, that was a process I used for training Alpha. Training Alpha speaker, live talk speaker. We used to do live talk in Alpha, not the video. We don't watch video. We do live talk. So I will use this method of coaching, what I call mentoring church people, like different team. We go to different church, all right, and then the first run I will do everything. Our team will do everything from beginning to the end, and the team of the church team will just observe everything. So those who want to be speaker, they also observe how I speak, and then of course sometimes the other church they are pastors, so they can pick up faster. So instead of wait for the next course for them to do live talk, I'll first do the first 3 talks, and then I give them some tips, and then they do the next talk, and then I do the following one, and so on. So slowly they take over. Okay, so by the time we are there for 2 or 3 rounds, they are able to run the whole show without us. So that's how we go about mentoring Alpha teams. So there's a specific ministry objective. All right. So if you want to learn something and you think that someone is doing it well, whether it's healing ministry, prayer ministry, then you need to find a mentor. Okay. And of course, in terms of education, so finding a mentor is like the nurture part, the upbringing part, spiritual parenting part. But you also need to get educated. Okay. You cannot stop learning. All right. So in terms of education, all right, there are 2 kinds. One is informal. Okay, you can learn on your own. You can learn in a mentoring relationship. You can attend cell group and all that. These are learning opportunity. But you also can go for formal education. All right, attend courses. Okay, depending on what you're interested in. If you are just interested in a marketplace ministry, maybe you need to acquire some skills. All right, and marketable skills. Or if you are interested in ministry opportunities, then you need to go for theological classes, okay, and so on. So it depends on what you want. Some kind of formal education will be helpful, right? Some people want to be a counselor, so then they enroll in like Trinity Christian Center. They have a good master's in counseling course. And so it's a long course, all right, take 3 years to finish. But if you're really interested in this counseling, then you have to go for equipping. You cannot just come out and be a counselor without the knowledge and the skill. So there are a few places you can go for the different kind of courses, all right? Okay, if you're you just want to acquire marketable skill, now they have the SG United courses. I don't know if they're still going on. They pay you to study. Then the IAL, Institute Adult Learning. Then okay, we're going for theological study at Dongling Bible School, Trinity Theological College, Trinity Christian Center, a lot, TCA, and so on. All right, so or you can also attend occasional workshop and seminar for specific area of qualification and learning. Okay, so you have to improve yourself. You cannot stop learning, and that's very important. All right, if you want to be used by God, you cannot stop learning. There are some pastor after the seminary, they graduate, they don't read anymore. Okay, that's bad. All right, because the world is changing and we have to keep up to date what is happening so that our ministry effectiveness, we don't lose that edge, the cutting edge. All right, you have to sharpen our saw. That's how Stephen Covey said that we must sharpen our saw. All right, otherwise become blunt. And I think the most important way to sharpen our saw, okay, is to develop a reading habit. I started to have this reading habit when I was a new Christian. I saw, in those days I was in a Methodist church, and there is a Methodist youth fellowship on Saturday, and I attended. And then there is library table where there are books for loan, and then there is little sign say, "Readers of today are leaders of tomorrow." When I saw that at that time, I was like 20 years old. I said, why not? I would like to be a leader one day. And so the way to start is to read. Okay. And so I borrow whatever book I have and start reading. All right. So that was the beginning of my own reading habit. And I always find it very interesting to read new books. All right. But let me just think a little bit about reading. All right. Don't just read popular books. Nowadays a lot of books that I read, after a few chapters, I know what the author is going to say. Because it's always the same old thing. There's no revelational truth. Okay. And recently I was reading this book. Let me just show you. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Anyway, it's a written by a Chinese author. All right. Some of you may be aware of Watchman Nee. All right. Now, Watchman Nee book are worthwhile reading. Okay. Yeah. And so, but he has a disciple called Witness Lee. Now, some people in my early day, I was told that Witness Lee, he's very dangerous. He's teaching very careful. That's because it's hard to understand. But recently, I've been reading it, and I found that he got a lot of insight. And you got to read slowly. You cannot read too fast. Okay. It's not like those popular books you can skim and you know what they're going to say. This kind of book you cannot skim. You got to read. All right. So make it a habit to learn and read spiritual classic. Don't go for the popular, cheap, and easy to read book. Okay. And of course, nowadays the trend is what we call bite-sized learning. Bite-sized, that means 5 minute kind of learning. You won't go very far with this kind of book or kind of internet bite-sized learning. Nowadays, you are told that if you go beyond 10 minutes, it's too long. But how can you teach anything for 10 minutes? Sorry, that's why I'm taking 1.5 hours to teach. Okay. And of course, also learn to reflect, not just read, but also reflect. Reflect on what you are reading. Okay. Reflect on what you're reading. Take notes, keep a journal. You can jot down your notes in a computer or notebook, whatever your method. But you have to interact when you read. Okay. So this practice of self-reflection is very important. Because we just read 1 year in, 1 year out. Just like listen to a sermon. Then, of course, also try new experiences in life. Don't keep doing the same thing the same way, all right, for the next 20 years, okay? You have to learn, you have to gather new life experiences, all right? When I was in pastoral ministry for 7 years, I thought I have learned a lot of things. Until I left the pastoral ministry and went and joined Alpha and realized that actually the real ministry is out there in the world. And then I went to prison, workplace, and that's when I learned the most, So have I stuck to pastoral ministry? I probably will not learn many of these things that I've learned through my interaction with prisoners, with marketplace people, and so on. All right. Initially, it was quite frightening, for a pastor to be out there. All right. You have no security. People don't recognize you and all that. You have no status. All right. But that's important. We must expose ourselves to new situation if we want to grow and learn. So put yourself in new situation. Don't just stick to the same old thing. All right. And keep doing the same thing year in, year out. So don't get into a rut. Don't get stuck in the rut. Because certain personality tend to resist change. I put there the SJ types. Not all the time, but most of the time they like things to be the same. Okay, don't upset the cards. All right. And certain type like change, all right, but sometimes too much. Okay, but anyway, what this little diagram, this little saying says, fill your life with experiences, not things. Have story to tell, not stuff to show. So I think at the end of the day, we must enrich ourselves through life experiences. So we must be prepared to get out of our comfort zone, all right? Get out of the boat, as it were. Okay, like Peter, walk on water, even if you sink, never mind, at least you tried. If you're introvert, try to do things that require some extroversion, all right? Even though it make you very uncomfortable, but you'll grow, you'll stretch, okay? And same thing with the other, if you're an extrovert, learn to introvert by learning to reflect. Don't be running around all the time without thinking through what you're doing. Okay, so stretch your natural gifts. Get out of your comfortable boat to walk on water. Okay. Now, I hope that by the time you come to this point, you know what is your natural gifting. Some of us are not even using our natural gifting. We are just following our education, our nurture, our nurture. And some of our nurture is not bringing us very far. But if you know that perhaps, it's just like, okay, let me just give an example for myself. My nurture trained me to be a science student, okay? A science student, all right? I was trained in science. I studied science, all right, physics. I teach science when I was a teacher. I didn't know that actually I could have done humanities. I actually enjoy reading history, philosophy, and things like that. But I would never had the opportunity because as a science student, you don't go into language study and things like that, humanity, you don't read all this stuff. But when I went to theological college, seminary, I was exposed to all this psychology, counseling, which I never touched as a science student. And that was when I discovered a whole new world, which my mindset and my personality actually like to explore, which I never had if I stuck to being a school teacher, teaching science only, So what I'm trying to say is that your gift, your natural gift may not be fully exploited if you just stick to one thing. So if you don't try new area, new avenue, you'll never know that actually your personal gift have not been fully exploited. Then when you find that you can really stretch your gift, you really find what you call, you're at your peak, okay? Your self-esteem go up, your self-confidence go up, and your self-respect also go up. So your self-image also go up. All right. So get out of the boat, okay? Get out of your boat. Don't always stay safe. Don't be kiasu, okay? All right, or kiasi, okay? Once in a while, it's okay to walk on the water and fail. Nothing wrong with failing. Singaporeans don't like to fail, but it's okay. If you fail, Jesus will pull you out. But if you now try, you don't even know you can walk. So in conclusion, all right, we have to acknowledge that everything that happened to us in our life, whether for better or for worse, God is sovereign. Paul says in Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Remember, Jesus suffered, okay? It's for his good. I won't say for his good. It's for good. Paul suffered too, all right? He was in prison, all right? He was persecuted, he was stoned, he experienced shipwrecked, all this so-called failure of life, but it was for good, so that the gospel can go out. So what is good is when God's purpose and will is fulfilled through you. Good doesn't mean pleasant, okay? Not all good experiences are pleasant. But nowadays we are so scared of negative experience, so we want to escape suffering. But Paul suffered, Moses suffered. Moses at one point was so sick of Israel leading these people, Israel's, that he almost want to give up. So it's never easy, okay, to do God's, what I call, to fulfill God's purpose, all right? But if we stick on, even all the negative experience and all the painful experience can be used for good, okay? And we must have that kind of faith, all right, whatever our experience it is, God has a hand in it and he can turn it for good. Remember Joseph, right? The story of Joseph, when he was a young man, he was quite boastful, right? He said, one day I'm going to rule over all of you, he told his brothers. And what happened? He paid a price for boasting. He was sold as a slave and nothing happened to him. All right, he suffered for like from the age of 17 until he was 30 years old. Okay, which like 13 years he suffered. And then one day suddenly he was promoted when the time came. All right, so if he had just looked at the negative events, he will say, how can this be God's will? But even painful experience is God's will. They're working everything for good so that one day when the time is right, he can use us to achieve his purpose. So this is what John Wesley called prevenient grace. The grace of God before we even know him. All right. So whether prosperity or adversity, we are shaped for a particular call of God. Now, what that is, you have to, first of all, you have to look at your past. All right. What are the things God has put you through? What are the education he has put you through? What are your natural gifts? From there, you can kind of narrow down, okay? Narrow down what is God's final call. And next week, when we continue, we'll look at how God used spiritual gift to confirm your call, okay? All right, so but nothing is wasted. I always say nothing in our life is wasted. Our life experience, good or bad, are like what you call divine chisel. Now God used it to shape us. It may be painful, but you got to cut out all those things that are no good or reshape us. Okay, so all right, so that is where we'll stop today. Okay, and maybe you may need to continue your education to achieve the call of God. Maybe you may need to find a mentor to help you towards that journey. All right, and maybe you may need to find new experiences, dare to change, dare to jump off the boat, because if you stay the way you are, you're not going to find God's will. None of the three persons we mentioned, Moses, in fact, if you look through all the Old Testament character, anyone that matters, that accomplish God's purpose, they always have to come out of something. All right, they come out of the comfort zone. Abraham had to leave his own hometown, his own city, to wander all over the Mesopotamia region. Okay, and so is Paul, and so is Moses. All right, and so is Jesus too. Huh? So if you want to find God's will, be prepared to be called out. I was reading this book I told you just now, the Chinese book, talk about the importance of us to get out of our world. When Jesus said that anyone who want to follow me must give up his family, houses, field for the kingdom. Then this will be the people who get it back. God will bless. Okay, any question before I close in prayer? Anyone have a dying question to ask us? Anybody?
Stop share.
Huh?
Stop share.
Stop share.
Stop share, then you can see.
Oh, okay. Let me, yeah, okay. My wife remind me to stop share. Okay, anyone have final question to ask before I close? Next week, we will look at the more spiritual aspect. Now that we are born again, God has given us spiritual gifts. So I'm going to look at the different kind of spiritual gift. And from there, you may be able to identify your calling a bit better, but also keep in mind that your spiritual gift always fit your personality and your experience. Okay, it doesn't happen randomly. Paul was started off as a teacher because he's already a man of learning. You cannot be a teacher if you never learn anything, right? Common sense. Huh? Okay. Okay, so any final question? Anyone? Either my explanation is perfect or you're all lost. Have I lost all of you? Okay, I see one thumb up. Okay, if you're following me, give me a thumbs up. Okay, then I know that I'm not talking to ghosts. All right, okay. So anyway, if there are no question, maybe you can always text me. All right, let me just close this time in prayer. So as I said, next week onward will be more on the biblical based kind of teaching. But I think it's very important that we start with natural gift, with nurture, and next week new birth. New birth give us many more things to consider. Okay, but as I said, the gifts must fit your personality. Let's pray. Father, I want to commit all of us who are listening in right now. I pray for the Holy Spirit to continue to grant us revelation so that even as we speak about our calling and even as we look back into how you shape us the way we are today, I want to pray from next week onward that this will become clear to many of us what you have called us to do and help us to be willing to take the bold step to find new opportunities, new experiences to confirm your call and willing to obey, even though it may require us to take the risk. So we ask for the Holy Spirit to guide all of us. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you for your time listening in. All right. So see you next week. Okay.
Thank
Good
you,
night
Pastor
and God
Dan.
bless.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
God
Good
bless.
night.
Good night.
Good Dr. Dan.
Good night.
Good
everyone.
night.
Reverend Dan.
Pastor Dan.